Alrighty, I know we have a lot of info to get through today, so I'm gonna go ahead and get us started, and people, as they filter in, can just go ahead and join. So hi to everyone who has joined us today. Thanks for being here. My name is Cassidy Jones, and I am the chair of the Dallas Design Awards this year. On the call today, we have David Stewart. He's a representative we have from COAT, Committee on the Environment. He's the chair of that committee this year. We also have Beth Brandt, who is actually on both COAT and the Design Awards, overachiever. And she will be leading this example of the Common App. And then we're also happy to have Bang Dang from Far and Dang, a founding partner there, to go over his project, Amber Residences, as our example project for this webinar tonight. So on that note, Beth, do you want to go ahead and get started? I will monitor the chat for questions, etc., to be answered at the end of the call.
Sure. Thank you so much, Cassidy. So this is kind of our agenda for this webinar. We're going to go briefly through the framework for design excellence and how it relates to the Common App, and a little bit of background on the Common App. We are also, as Cassidy said, we're going to go through, Bang and I are going to walk through the Amber Residences. And this was an award winning for the design awards from last year. So we thought that would be a great example case study, and we're excited to kind of dive into it a little bit more for each measure. And then we're just going to open up the Common App and take questions and go through things. So the first thing I wanted to talk about tonight was the framework for design excellence. So if you haven't seen this, or if you're not familiar with it, please go to the website. It's so helpful. Basically, good design is sustainable, and sustainable projects should be good design and great design. So it takes a holistic look at 10 measures within the framework, and it directly connects to the Common App. So as we go through this, will make more sense. What is the Common App? The Common App is basically an Excel sheet, and it allows for us to think about our projects in a holistic manner. And so it's not just talking about energy, it's not just talking about water or whatever you think of when you hear the word like green project. I mean, was it thought about the ecosystems thought about? Was it thinking about the economy and all these different things? So you put in these different metrics, and it comes out with this spider graph, and that kind of gives the jurors just a really snapshot as to how your project is performing in terms of holistic, sustainable, high performance design. So a little bit about why, different reasons why the Common App was created as a true grassroots effort. So some of the different Committee on the Environments and AIA people who were also care about good design were thinking, how can we measure this thing? And so they created the Common App, and it really took off from the local design awards committees. They kind of adopted it. Jurors were asking for it. They wanted to think about, how am I supposed to judge this just by photos? I'd like to think about this in other ways. So now they have, both to judge it on. It's part of, as far as good design and holistic design, is part of the AIA National Strategic Plan, as far as same for TXA as well, the Texas Society of Architects. And recently, it was maybe a couple years ago, it was realigned. It was not quite aligned, but pretty much now it completely aligns with the framework for design excellence. It also aligns with the Common App for awards alignment. And this is just an excerpt from that, kind of basically saying what I was just saying, that there should be metrics in terms of good, high sustainable design. So just a little bit about trends and precedences. This was started, I don't know, back in 2018 or something. Corey Squire and others created that. It took off in different areas like San Antonio and El Paso. you can see that, that a lot of local and state design awards committees have adopted this as a standard, and so has Dallas. Dallas has been leading the way for I think 4 or 5 years now for this. This is just about what you should know when we're going to fill out the Common App. One, it is a requirement, so you need to fill out every blank as much as you can. Even if it doesn't apply, just write not applicable or leave it. Just say yes, no, or leave it. You know what I'm trying to say. It'll make more sense when we get into it. But if it doesn't apply, just write not applicable. There are, there are narratives for each measure. For measures 2 through 10, you can write a narrative if you want, but we have made it an optional thing. So if you don't feel like you need to write anything, don't write anything. If you do, great. And it'll make more sense again when we get into it. And then the number 3 is there's no calculations that need to be done. Everything that you're filling in, you already know about your project just from doing, your res check or your com check or submitting for permit. You have all the information that you need to know, and it's mostly yes or no questions. This is just a screenshot from the AIA Dallas Design Awards website. These are all the resources that are available on the website. So there's going to be an updated version. This video that we're gonna post the new video, this one, to the website, and you have the link to the framework for design excellence. You can download the actual Common App. Again, it's an Excel spreadsheet, and we're gonna look at that more closely here in a second, and also how the awards aligns with the Common App. So again, these are the framework for design excellence. This is right off the website. The 10 measures are design for integration, equitable communities, ecosystems, water, economy, energy, well-being, resources, change, and discovery. And I'm gonna pass it over to Bang just to introduce the Amber residents.
Well, thanks for having me, actually, first of all. Yeah, this was a really special little project for us. We do a lot of housing, our small practice, a lot of multifamily stuff. This was a great development, which Beth had a huge part in doing the master plan with her team. It really worked out well for us because these were the 2 smallest lots in the entire development. And we actually teamed up with a developer who was able to build almost 30 units. And we talked him into buying these 2 small lots to become a part of the portfolio, because as we all know, construction costs on very small projects are actually quite expensive per square foot. So it's very difficult to do. We've been wanting to do this. We've done prototypes at our office, and this was one of the first times in 10 years that we finally get to actually build some. I won't go too much into it as we move further. There'll be more detail, but these are exactly 1,000 square foot each. So it just kind of serendipitously happened that way. But yeah.
So the first measure is design for integration. And it talks about how good design elevates any project. So it's thinking about beauty and function and balancing those 2. How can you lift the spirits, delight the senses? And also just from a functionality standpoint, can you have the kickoff meeting with all the key stakeholders on the project? So it's a little bit of beauty and delight, but also the integrated design process. There's also examples on the Framework for Design Excellence website. So I've just pulled like some of the most applicable ones to our region. But if you want to look at more information on any of these or look at other examples, they're all on the Framework for Design Excellence. They mostly pull from COAT Top 10 Design Award winners. So that's why you kind of see a lot of like different there's a lot of like Play-Doh projects because they always submit for COAT Top 10 Design Awards, but there's a lot of other great projects too. And I just tried to pull ones again from our region. So as far as design for integration, Bang, what did you think for that one?
Yeah, so obviously beauty and the light, I think I'll leave that for you guys to judge. Uh Obviously we aim for that on all the projects. The but I'll talk a little bit about that. And that kind of has to do with the place too. These two lots are at the very end of this development, meaning you come in from the front and you drive all the way down past all the other, I call them villages, and you get to these two, and they're the smallest. And the advantage is they actually bank up to the edge of the creek. And unlike other new developments, these trees are very mature. So that's a huge advantage we have in terms of the place. So in terms of placemaking, we actually rotated these units so that the front door faces the creek and the back of the units actually face the rest of the development. It works here also because in this development, especially these two units, there are no attached garages. So actually, if you park off-site, you are entering into your unit from the front door, not from the garage. So the fact that they face the creek and the mature forest of trees there is an immense place to connect to the front door in this specific instance, right? I talk a little bit about the integrated design process. I mean, by this point, we work with a lot of builders and craftsmen that we have done a lot of projects with. This was a very special project for us because they knew these were the smallest things they've ever done. We knew they had to be very budget friendly, but the key was everyone knew that these were basically like living in tree houses. That's how that was the theme that the whole team knew. And then, of course, the way the development is set up was totally to our advantage. Um, they have the trail there at the bank of the creek as their outdoor living space. So you see the little porches that face the creek. So all that is all integrated from the very beginning of the master plan to, of course, speaking with Diane Cheatham, working with the builders and craftsmen and subcontractors we knew that would fit this project and also could build it for this sort of tight budget. And also letting everyone know from the beginning, we're trying to do projects. These two things are like tree houses that function within the development.
That's good. Yeah, just to have that concept and take it all the way through. And the next measure is the design for equitable communities. Again, this can look different for different projects, different ways. We thought that for the Amber residence would be a good case study because a lot of times you do see larger projects and it really applies to all types of projects. So this one, even if it's, the example shown here is affordable housing for previously homeless people and disabled veterans. It's by Brooke Scarpa, and it's in Los Angeles. Los Angeles has like really well funded affordable housing projects, so they can do this kind of thing. But I think that it's important to think about Dallas and Texas too, and that we can still provide equitable communities. So anything that looks at good design that positively impacts any future occupants or the larger community. Is it accessible? Is it walkable? Is it designed to the human scale? That kind of thing. Does the project happen to think about social equity or justice, diversity, any of those things? Sometimes it's a single family residence, it might not, and that's okay. But you can still be thinking about accessibility, how they're gonna live and engage in that house over the long term, that kind of thing.
Yeah, so obviously scale, inclusion, diversity, and equity was what we were aiming for when we tried to do when we did these two tiny homes. We knew regardless of how the development filled out, because these were so tiny, they would be the most affordable. And we actually, from the beginning, thought of these as really starter homes for someone. And the fact that also they don't have attached garages, you get a little more living square footage for a little less money because you're not paying for, say, 400 square feet of garage space that you're building. And then also the expensive part of the construction generally starts with the foundation. But now a big part of that foundation is not for your 2-car garage, it's actually for living space. So we really honed in on that. That was a huge advantage. And yeah, so we really felt we wish there were more in that development, but at least these two offered two families or two individuals a way to get into that development at a much less cost. We've done other units there that were, 2,400, 2,500 square feet. So easily 2 times or over this size. So they would be quite a bit more expensive than this.
Yeah, I know it's good to have that range. That helps it overall, the diversity. Maybe we could have had more smaller lots, but I think the overall idea of like having the variety was helpful. So the next measure is design for ecosystems. So thinking about humans, but also non-human inhabitants in your site, in your region. We try to maybe avoid decorative turf grass. You could create and get creative with your landscape architects about how can you pull in some habitats, whether it's nighttime habitats or maybe it's butterfly gardens, anything that would support non-humans, so birds, animals, that kind of thing. We could also just look at reducing human impacts, such as less light and noise overall onto your site.
Yeah, so for us, obviously the reduction of impact, basically these are, about 500 square feet of actual footprint. They're 2-story, so they pretty much fill out the, both floor plates. So it's very hard to find in Dallas sort of 500 square foot footprint, right? That's basically a 2-car garage. Also, and this kind of goes with the water consumption, because the lots are so small, the yards are tiny, and we did actually artificial turf. It was just enough for, a grill or a little dog, because obviously you have the other parks in the other villages in this development. And of course you have the trail and the creek. So there was really no need for really a huge yard, especially not one that you had the water. So the impact was really, really low. And then in terms of, maybe that's another subject matter, but we definitely made sure, like the treehouse idea, that every room had a view to practically to the creek.
It's great, and there's not a lot of lighting or site lighting on the building, so it
Correct.
yeah. The next measure is water. So we can always benchmark how much a typical toilet would use and try to reduce, to go to the low flow fixtures and that kind of thing. But we can also go beyond that and think about how we can eliminate the need for watering outdoor, or at least mitigating that down to only what's required. You can manage the stormwater runoff maybe on site, or maybe perhaps just filter it and clean it up before it goes off site. And there's just a lot of different options, the ways to think about this. So the example here is the Marine Education Center at the Gulf Coast Research Laboratory in Mississippi. And this project was perfect for water because they were thinking about water conservation and stormwater management. They were thinking about capturing the water off the roofs and reusing that on the irrigation, on the landscape plantings for the site. But there's different ways to think about for water. And Bang, I think you just mentioned it, but do you want to reiterate that? And I'll add about
Yeah, so it's a very very small artificial turf yard for each unit for a little dog or a grill. And then but here I'd like to talk a little bit about, for us, when you do a lot of housing, multifamily and even custom single family, there's not a lot of places where it lends into accommodating or dealing with issues in the Common App. So a strategy that we've used before and we used on this one is the narrative becomes really important for us. Now you can't ever tell if the judges actually end up reading that, right? Or do they just go down the numbers and the yes no stuff? But like here, what we do is generally I do a first pass at them and I try to answer everything. And then I come back in a few days. And there's always something that I forget in the narrative that that may not be as calculable, but if the judges actually read it, it makes sense. For instance, in this one, it was once again the small footprint. The less footprint you have, the less you disturb natural drainage, right? So, that's huge. So we put that on there. So I think if this was a lesson for others who are filling this out, in the future, uh, for projects that doesn't lend themselves to um, a very robust sort of energy conservation, sustainability, green building kind of project. There may be hidden things that you do that you're not thinking about that the narrative really helps to revisit before you submit.
It's a really good point, being like the sometimes we, and we'll get to this in a minute, I guess, but sometimes we want that, we're architects, we want to have everything perfect, but the spider graphic does not need to be perfect. And the judges can really judge this however they want. So the Common App is just one piece. They're looking at the overall design, they're looking at the beautiful images and the floor plans and everything. So they understand what good design is, and this is just one aspect. And yeah, if they wanted to like dig in a little bit more, then they have that narrative to really understand, especially when it's something unique or different than what's in those yes or no questions.
And I think like Ben said, reading over the 10 points of the framework just gives you a chance to kind of figure out how, which one of those was most important to you in that project, and the narrative helps with that.
So that's the next one is called Design for Economy. We've talked about it a little bit already, but I think it's important to reiterate that good design also adds value for owners, occupants, community, and the planet. Some things that we don't always think about when we hear the word economy is can we reuse an existing building? A lot of our projects that we've been working on more and more these days are existing buildings, and so this one is huge for that. If it is new construction, how do we right size the program so it's not overly built? Or can you use two different functions in one space? Or can you move the corridors to be outside in a shaded area? These are all different ways to reduce that footprint whenever you can. The other things to think about are just materials. We're going to get more into that in a different section, but sometimes the simplest materials are beautiful, and you don't have to have fancy, stone or marble kind of finishes. And then you can even go into the narrative piece about how it was financed and any incentives that were brought in, how it connects to the community. These are different things that you can elaborate on, again, in that narrative.
Yeah, and I'll touch on the economy. I mean, these are the floor plans. It was done not only in terms of open space and very small, which of course makes it an economic use of every inch of the project, but also trying to eliminate a lot of doors, so that the plan flows quite freely, and trying to use every bit you can see, and using taking advantage of those kind of dead spaces where the angles are. But I'd like to touch a little bit about financing, and I think that's maybe that's the only way for small practices to kind of push this type of work. Like I mentioned before, that trying to do just these two projects is almost impossible because the square foot cost is crazy. And when times are busy, contractors don't want to take on 1,000 square foot of work, right? they can do much, much bigger work. And so what we did was when we introduced the developer to this development, we talked about the other villages. And then after that was a sort of agreement, we talked them into doing these two almost as as like a experiment. But the other 28 units would cover the cost of these. He didn't have to make money on these basically. So I think we just have to be. I think the lesson for us on this was be very be very resourceful in looking for opportunities to do things like that.
Cool. So that economy of scale really helped you.
Yeah.
The number 6 is energy. And this is kind of the thing that I think most of us think about when we hear the word sustainable. So of course we're gonna go through this, but you want to, as you're working on your projects, if you're like starting from scratch, you kind of want to set your benchmark, figure out what your goal is, how you're trying to reduce that footprint, or is that EUI, the energy use intensity, which just means that KBTU, how much energy it's using per square foot per year. And the zero tool can help you with that. We're going to look at that in a minute. But if it's an interior project, you look at the lighting power density. That's honestly really easy to get now with the LEDs being so accessible and affordable. And if you're not doing an energy model, the other thing you can look at is your window to wall ratio. I know we love glass, but you can really be strategic in where you place that glass and still overall have lots of views out and have that lower window to wall ratio. And if you're doing an energy model, then you can start to think about other strategies, passive strategies, such as a good thermal envelope, mostly in the roof, really good windows, try to get the best windows you can. And then you can think about, the wall R values and your high efficiency SEER HVAC systems and LED lighting and that kind of thing.
Yeah, so in this one, I wanted to mention something that doesn't get mentioned as much is that on the energy side, not to use basically natural day lighting, right? Now there's a balance of that, right? You don't want a lot of heat gain, but this house, I mean, you never have to turn on the lights during the day. It's well lit naturally, and which also reduces the heat from the light. LEDs help quite a bit, but I also think about placement of the supplier. Finding ways. We usually use open web trusses for all our projects, so you can weave in between. So that means you can place the supplier towards the envelope of the building and near windows. So if you capture the envelope or close to the envelope of the building, then the interior doesn't need as much supplier because you're insulated there. So little things like that. But once again, our advantage was, you can see in that stairwell how big the trees were already there. So we could put some windows and know that at certain times of the day, we're getting immense shade from them. So.
The next one is for well-being. So this one is a little overlaps with the materials, but you can also kind of start to think about what encourages a healthy lifestyle for your design. How can you provide more occupant control if it's like an office or something like that? How can you connect people with nature and give them a place to be healthy and be outside? You also can think about acoustics for this and just encouraging movement and a healthy lifestyle. This was the Candida project. It's a Living Futures project. So it's kind of went above and beyond LEED, and it thought about healthy materials, and it's all the materials within the project are red list free. So it was going above and beyond. It also encouraged, you can tell from this beautiful photo that they're encouraging you to take the stairs. The the elevators are there and they're not far around the corner, but if you are able to take the stairs, then you're kind of naturally drawn up this atrium, and
It's beautiful.
really awesome. Similarly,
Yeah.
also beautiful.
So for us it was the tree house. That was the well-being. And I'd have to look through my notes, but I know during the construction of this, because the whole took a long time because we were trying to build, 15 or whatever at the same time. But I know we overlapped COVID at some point. So it was very appropriate that there's that little office there where you got the two windows looking out into the sky and the trees, and then the birch plywood on the sort of funky gable ceiling was paying homage to the tree house, but with the different windows all around the bedroom. Was the idea of if you were in lockdown, that you were always connected to the outside. So
I love that it just kept the ceiling like that natural. Is it plywood or natural
yeah,
material?
it's a birch plywood that we just clear sealed. Yeah.
That's great. Number 8 is resources. So again, thinking about material selection and then balancing your priorities to achieve like a safe and healthy project. That's also thinking about the supply chain and that kind of stuff. So where are your materials coming from? Have you thought about it as far as the red list? Can you kind of work to get materials that are maybe they have a EPD, which is the Environmental Product Declaration, or they have an HPD, which is the Healthy Product Declaration. Or you can go to ILFI's website and look for all the declare labels are on there. And these databases are just expanding more than you would anticipate. So there's lots of resources out there now. If you may already have some healthy materials on your project and you don't even know about it. So I would just encourage you to kind of think fresh and maybe you have some. Also, you can think about zero waste in your operations of the design itself. There's some good resources for that. But construction demolition, some of this is already required. Like for the city of Dallas, they already require you to recycle and remove a large percentage of your construction waste to divert that from the landfill. So again, kind of as David was saying, as you're going through this, you may forget and come back, but in that narrative or as you're going through the questions, there may be stuff that you're thinking about that you're not quite thinking about yet. And again, reusing materials. So this example is from San Antonio. It's a warehouse adaptive reuse project.
Yeah, so for us, obviously the sort of smallness of the project, but one thing, almost all our materials are locally sourced, but especially with these small projects, we partly for the economics of construction costs, but also trying to pretty much the whole skin is one material. And that helps because it reduces waste. Because anytime you have leftovers, there may be another spot you can use it. Whereas if you have a lot of exterior materials, as you guys know, sometimes you have to buy in bulk or you have to cut, and then there's no other area to use that, right? And what happens to that material? So if you can keep a lot of projects within aesthetic reasons, almost in this one is pretty much metal siding. And then, if you have leftovers, it can be used. And for us, we had the sort of mini rib white in other units. So we could have used them if we had some leftovers. We could use them in other units here. So
I was just thinking about this in because I don't do residential every day, but the certain studs come in different lengths,
That's
right?
right.
So you could
That's
be
right.
thinking about where you set your finished floor based on the length of that stud.
That's right. So exactly, like a 10-foot ceiling with one sole plate and two top plates. That's a 9, 5, and 5/8 inch standard stud. That's what we use. So you don't have to cut or add. And that gets you basically a 10-foot 1 1/4, you know?
That's so great. It sounds like a random floor to floor
Yeah.
height. But I think I would throw that into the narrative and explain that, you know, that we're
Yeah,
not having
yeah,
to.
we always do that. So, it's always that 5 and 5/8. So, a 9-foot ceiling is 8, 5 and 5, so and then with your top plate and sole plate, it ends up to be 9 feet, close enough. So yeah, we do that too.
Great.
See, you remember things that you don't, if you go back to you remember.
Exactly. Number 9 is change. And we can think about this in different ways. You can think about it from a resilience standpoint. We're starting to think about how can we design for future scenarios, whether it's if it's a library, maybe it needs to be a resilience hub for a social construct. If there's a crisis happening, or if there's a brownout or a blackout, a place for people to come and get water and get internet, those kind of things. If it's a house, maybe it can be taken down and reused in a different location, or there's all kinds of options here. So we're looking at risk and vulnerabilities. We're thinking about passive survivability. Maybe you lose power for a day or a couple days. Can you live in your house? Can you live in that building or work in that building without power for a day or two? If you have good thermal envelope and you have good shading and different things like that, you can. I mean, these are things, I know it's hot, I know it's Texas, but these are things that we can think about and we can design for.
Yeah, so in this one, the shade, of course, we were thinking about, could you, like Beth said, could you live and work for a day or two? And it was the daylighting. You could work. I mean, you'd have plenty of natural light. But the other thing we thought about was flexibility. If you look at the plan again, a lot of the rooms could become second, third bedrooms pretty easily. And that's what we thought about. If, we thought about the pandemic a lot. If someone need to come and stay here, like an older person with supervision during a pandemic, then one of those other flex spaces could easily be converted into a bedroom, and they were made for that.
That's great. The number 10 is discovery. So these are things about how can we learn from our projects and apply those lessons learned or apply those lessons learned from previous projects. So you can do obviously these post occupancy evaluations. You can engage your occupant shortly afterwards and start to learn from that. Or anything like that. These are different ways about thinking about that. So I would kind of go, this one might be a good one to go to the framework for design excellence and dig in a little bit more. But I'm thinking beyond post evaluations, what else can you do? Yeah.
So like we said, these were the first, these are the smallest projects we've ever done. So they're kind of our prototypes.
I like
But
that.
what's great for us is we can show them to other, if we continue to do a lot of development work, we can show them to other developers. But I think the biggest lesson for us was what I mentioned earlier in terms of the financing, that, you leverage getting to do these by doing other larger ones, right? Like that's your selling that, hey, we can do 10 normal unit sizes, but could we do 4 or 3 of these in addition? And now that we've done them, we know how to do them faster, more economically, and hopefully there's a market for them. I think there are, obviously.
That's such a good point. You're talking about, I think about lessons learned from a user standpoint, but you're talking about lessons learned from how do we continue to build equitable homes? I think that's really
Right.
All right, so we're gonna jump over to the actual Common App. Again, it's just an Excel spreadsheet. They make it sound like it's some big thing, but it's just Excel. Do we have any comments or questions in the chat before we get started?
I don't see any in the chat, but if anyone online has them, feel free to put them in the chat and I will moderate that.
Thanks, Cassidy. Can you guys see this screen okay? Can you see the comment okay? I need to zoom in. My mouse is not working. Okay. This is the 2025 Common App. So you want to download the new version. If you did one last year, you're going to resubmit. Please download the new version and then transfer the material and your data over to the 2025 version. We're going to be checking that it's this version. It's just cleaned up, and a few of the bugs from last year got taken out. And then the first part, I'm just going to go through kind of the basics of the Common App. You really only need to look at this first page. You don't worry about these other pages at all. And you fill in the basic project information. On all the gray boxes are the only ones you need to fill out. The white means it's automatically calculated. So there's nothing for you to do for the white ones. The little triangles over here, that means that there's a drop down in the gray box cell. So anytime you see a triangle, click on the gray box cell next to it, and it'll take you, to that drop down. Other things basically to know about the Common App is there's tons of resources over to the sides here. So if you get onto something and you're like, I just don't know I've never heard of the zero tool, that's no big deal. Like, you're going to click on it and you don't even need to know all of this information, but if you wanted to dig in a little bit, you can. It's not necessary to like understand the zero tool to do this. It's just in case you wanted to learn more. Like, as I said, there's no calculations within the Common App because it has all of that already done for you in the white boxes. Other things to know is just that it's asking you, for example, what is the total floor area? And you might say to yourself, what do you mean by that? It says, it means that they're asking for the conditioned space plus the non-conditioned program space in your project. So that's what that means in this case, right? So it's kind of giving you instructions or definitions along the way. So I still reference these all the time. And I also go to the links if I want to learn more about things. The other thing that's kind of new for this year is we have the links straight to the framework for design excellence for each measure. So anytime you're going through this and you're filling something out, maybe you're working on your narrative for design for integration, you're like, I need to refresh my memory of all the things that could mean, and this is what that looks like. So there's one for each measure. It kind of goes through some of the questions you may ask yourself. It has the focus topics, and then they call it a toolkit, but it's thinking about, the high impact things, best practices, lots of best practices, any other resources that are available for free. And then, like I was saying, the case studies are all here. And AIA is working on updating their case studies. Some of them, they're not too bad. They're not super old, but they've all were Passcoat top 10 design award winners. So they're really good examples. All right, so then we're gonna just kind of fill out, and we based this on the Amber residences so that we can kind of have a better understanding of what that might look like for a residential project. We're in Dallas, and so under the climate zone is 2A, and then you go to this drop down here, and it has all the different types of building uses. So if it's primarily, in this case, it's primarily single family residential, so you just say that, and then 100%. If it's a mixed use project, say it's a library and I don't know, it's a library and office space. The city of Dallas is trying something new. You may say, okay, maybe this is a library, 50% of it's a library and 50% of it is an office. So you can make those distinctions here. And then if it's super mixed use, I would say just do the top 3, right? And then just make sure it equals 100% at the bottom. Obviously, this is just whether it's new construction, renovation, interior only. These are not, this information up here is really just helping you once it gets further down. It's not affecting the spider graph at this point. It's talking about the permit year, and that is, and it's talking about how much cost. That gives you the cost per square foot and how many hours you're going to be in there on a regular basis. And then it's just kind of asking some encouraging goals. Like it automatically calculated the 2030 challenge goal of 80% based on the permit year. So that's what that was for. And then we're just being honest, like, has the firm signed up for the 2030 commitment? No. Okay, moving on. No big deal. If you have, great. If you haven't, let's just keep going. And Bang, just jump in on any of these that you want to talk more about. The first one we talked about, design for integration. The full Common App has 3 narratives. We've taken this down to 1, so this one is a required one, and it allows you to kind of explain the overall project. You can also talk about integration strategies within the same narrative. The second one is again for equitable communities, and the kind of the one non-yes or no question is just your level of community engagement. And there's a resource off to the side if you're like, I don't know what consult versus involve means. There's a little, and it's literally a Google Docs file that we created that explained this a little bit more. It was more involved, and we've simplified this down to like just being this. So a lot of houses don't even have anything, so you would just say inform. But in this case, you were able to consult a little bit with the developers and other people, right, Bing?
Yeah, and Diane Cheatham and understanding the master plan, basically, you know.
I left this one blank because it's new. It says, are universal design principles incorporated to meet the needs of the project with diverse abilities? And it's talking about age or physical disabilities or anything else that you could say. The other ones are talking about, again, passive survivability, and that shows up later on as well. And then if these don't apply, maybe you talk about what you did do in this, which Farandang did in this example. Again, the rest are all yes or no questions. Ecosystem is like where's it at? Urban, suburban, rural. Was the site, is it a green site? Meaning like, was it previously developed or not? Yes, it was. I mean, almost every place, unless you're like out in the middle of nowhere, has been developed in the past at some point. We talked about native vegetation, that kind of thing. If there is native vegetation, how much of it was native? You know, maybe there's a few non-native, like a pansy or something, I don't know, but most of it's native, so you have 90% there. That's asking about bird collision deterrence and that kind of thing. And again, if you're like, I don't know, maybe I did and I didn't even know it. But you can go to these references over here as far as dark sky as well. The water is just asking simple yes or no questions. Economy, it's taking from that information at the top down in here and getting that cost per square foot. But it also asks about, did the project address issues of affordability? In this case, yes, it did. And if it didn't, just say no. It's no big deal. Energy, what we want to do here is, depending upon where your project is, you're going to put in the energy code that's applicable to your project. So you know this because you already did the res check or the com check or what have you to get the permit. The state of Texas is required to be at least the 2015 IECC. So unless the municipality upped that, it's probably this one. And then you can see the benchmark EUI, the energy use intensity, that's that KBTU, so energy per square foot per year. It was automatically calculated from the information at the top. Is the building all electric? In this case, no, the urban commons had natural gas, right? Because it was an efficient heating source. Now we're kind of, since that project, we're kind of moving as an industry away from natural gas because it is a fossil fuel. And because a lot of mechanical systems have gotten so much more efficient than they used to be with all electric. But it's always that balance. So we're just like, no, and moved on. And this one, I think I changed this. It's actually just energy code. So that's what we did here. If they had run an energy model, you would say simulated energy model, and then you would start to fill these out. And then it'll kind of automatically calculate that. So if you ran an energy model, this is at the very bottom of the energy model. It's right there. But if you didn't, you just need to say it's not and leave all of this blank.
Hey Beth, there's been a request in the chat for you to zoom in just slightly more.
Yeah. Let me. Oh.
And we do have a couple of questions when you're done with explaining.
Can you guys see that a little better? Thank you for that. So if you have on-site energy use, like a photovoltaics or anything like that, sorry, jumping back. The other option here is that you're actually keeping track of the energy use. So again, if you are, you would click actual, and then you would fill out, how much megawatt hours, and I think you can even change this. Yes, you can change it to the metric that you're keeping track of. So if you've gathered up your energy bills over the year, then you can add those up and put them in here. And then if you do have photovoltaics on or any other on-site energy, then you would mark that you do here. In this case, we don't. So we can leave all of this blank, but if you are, then you would kind of start to fill these other ones out. So again, all of the KBTUs, EUI, all of that gets automatically calculated. So you don't have to worry about the white spaces. And then say that for whatever reason you want to explain your energy use or your design for energy a little bit better, then all of these from measure 2 all the way down to 10, these are all optional. We've added these back in so that anyone working on their submission can elaborate for these different measures if they choose, but they don't have to. Well-being is all yes or no questions, operable windows and such. 8 is asking if you reused an existing building. So if you did, that will help you in this case. And if you didn't, obviously this one didn't. It's just was new construction. If you did, it says, how much of it was reused. So just do your best to calculate that. The primary structural system, and was any strategies taken to reduce embodied carbon? So if it's a wood structure, that helps. That's, low carbon material. So you can kind of look at these different drop downs and see if that applies to your project. The last, number 9 is design for change. So this should be 30. I was messing around to see if it changed anything. So stick frame, it kind of gives you some examples off to the side. For stick frame, it's 30 years. If it's concrete, steel, etc., that's 100. And then you can kind of, from there, you can kind of make your best assumption on the lifespan of the building. Was the design flexibility, as Bing was saying, any of those spaces could be adapted in the future. And then it's talking again about the different mitigations so these are some of those things that we talk about, from passive survivability, social unrest, pandemic, anything that kind of incorporated into that. And then the last one, they're just asking about the evaluation, any occupancy surveys and that kind of thing. And if not, then maybe you go into a little bit more in the narrative as far as in the Amber Residences. Sounds like we could have talked about how this was an experiment for you guys to design more economically in the future and take those lessons learned. So that's kind of a quick run through. I'm glad to take questions, thoughts.
All right, the first question we have in the chat is from Winston. He says, how do you tell the legacy and history of a firm? In the examples, many of the projects show new and present projects, but there isn't much history. Or is it not a big interest in submissions? Or is there a limit you would suggest in showing, like no projects over 5 years old? Winston, are you talking about submissions in general, or is this specific to the Common App? In general. So in general, our submission requirements do require that the project was completed within the last 5 years. Does that answer your question? Perfect. We also have a question from Robert in the chat asking, how did you calculate the estimated EUI? Are there easy residential calculators?
So that's a great question. Let me share again. It does it for you automatically. So once you type in what it's used for and how many hours are being used and all this information at the top, you can see that the EUI is automatically calculated. So here it did an automatic benchmark based on the information above. The benchmark EUI was calculated to be 37.5. And then because they did that, they met the 2015 energy code minimums, it knows based on an old building that was done, a similar building in 2003, that's the benchmark. That's where the benchmark comes from. It's called CBEX, and it just means an average building of that type from 2003 compared to today. And that's like set in stone, where all the benchmarks for the EUIs are based around that. And so because we are now in 2015 and we've met the energy code for 2015, that is how it came up with the estimated EUI of 22.5. So you don't have to do it at all. Like all you have to do is fill in the grays and it will tell you what that is. Does that answer your question? I can't see the chat, so you have to tell me, Cassidy.
Yeah, Robert has not responded in the chat yet. Oh, he says yes. Great. Those were our only 2 questions in the chat. If anyone else has one, please go ahead and put it in now. I know we're running late on time, just a little bit, but happy to answer any final questions that get thrown in there.
Just had one quick question for Bang. I know that he's done a couple of these for the design awards now, a couple of the Common App submissions. And I'm just wondering if you start thinking about these things sooner now as you're working on projects or you're deciding which projects would work well with the framework.
Absolutely, David. Yeah, and then, sometimes you have projects that are just not aligned with this, unfortunately, but absolutely. And we're trying to push this more in the single family custom too, because, that depends on the personality, but we definitely try to push that.
Yeah.
And I think you benefited a lot on this project by, like you were saying, the integrative process at the beginning, having everything master plan and having a low impact, planting scheme and all these things that, I think that integrative approach is really important.
Yeah, and I think just having fill them out so many times.
Yeah.
Uh, you can't help it. It's in the back of mind. But honestly, the fact of filling them out forces you to understand the parameters better, right? And learn new things that you didn't learn before. Um, and and then sometimes you're better able to communicate with a new client about why you should do this, you know.
Great project. Thank you for sharing that with us.
And honestly, David, the pandemic is a great is a great um is a great one. We've all been through it now, so you can talk about daylighting, you know, being close to nature, having a flexible home that can adapt to different functions, that kind of stuff. You can really talk about that.
Yeah, and I think you can tell just by looking at not every project's perfect. But no project is perfect actually. So there's always a give and take, and the jurors are we leave it up to the jurors to decide who is who's worthy of the award based on how their own prerogatives. So we provide the Common App as a way for them to measure, but it's just one tool. They also have all their beautiful images. They also have the plans. So it's just one piece in this overarching thing, and there's no scorecard or anything like that. So it's really just a way to elaborate on your beautiful designs, right?
Beth, that was wonderfully put, and actually also spoke to one of the questions we just got in our chat, which says, "Thank you for clearing up misconceptions about the difficulty of filling out the Common App. What do jurors pay attention to most? Is it the written portions? Any trend of them paying more attention to figures?" Alexi, that is great questions. I would say that the trends really change year to year depending on the panelists of jurors. You know, everyone who we fly in, they're always come in really thoughtful and with great opinions, but their opinions are individual to themselves, you know. So sometimes there's great projects that don't win an award one year, but will win an award the next year, just depending on the jury, which I think is common in most design award events. But like Beth was saying, the Common App is definitely just a portion. And some of those written portions of the Common App are not even a requirement. So it's definitely a holistic view of the project. Beth, if you want to add on to that. I think we answered that pretty well. Any final questions? It looks like that might have been the last one for the night. All right, well, I would just like to thank everyone for coming tonight, especially Bang, thank you for coming and letting us use your project as an example. Obviously, a very cool and beautiful project and very deserving of your awards last year. And thank you, Beth and David, for helping put all of this together. If anyone has questions about filling out the Common App and the Design Awards in general, this video will be posted on the AIA Dallas Design Awards website, so you can review it when trying to fill out the application for yourselves, as well as my email as chair and my vice chair's email is also on that website, and you can reach out to us. We'll connect you with whoever your questions are best suited for.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, of course. You guys were wonderful. Alrighty, guys, have a great night. Bye.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.